What if we told you there is one thing you could start doing today that could divorce proof your marriage? Does it sound too good to be true? Today, we have some honest conversation about our attempts to connect with our partner and how one small move can increase or decrease the likelihood of divorce. Hello, Andrea.
Hey, Jess.
Okay, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you watched us on YouTube?
More than I'm willing to admit on a recorded podcast.
Yeah, it's like I go and I'm like, ooh, we got another view. And I'm like, crap, it's me.
It's true. It's true. But hopefully one
Okay.
day it will be our listeners, right?
I am thinking so, right? And so, everybody listening to this podcast, you can go to YouTube
Mm-hmm.
and actually see us while you're listening to us. However, I checked us out on YouTube after a friend of mine told me it was hard to find us. So I did a little research and I went to YouTube and I typed in Honest Women Podcasts. And guess what it auto-corrected to?
What?
Hottest Girls Podcast.
What?
Yes, Hottest Girls Podcast. I have so many thoughts about that. But first, let me just tell our listeners to make sure when you're looking for us that it does not autocorrect to hottest.
Oh my
that
gosh.
it stays with honest.
Also, I just want to say that I am offended, YouTube, that you would not pull
Right?
us up for Hottest
For
Girls
Hottest Girls
Podcast.
Podcast.
I mean, I'm not really going for hot this morning. I've got my headband on. I'm playing a little more like Blair Waldorf. But if it was like a Cruel Intentions thing,
Ooh,
You
it could be
know?
a little Cruel Intentions. Like a little, right?
but still, I'm offended. But also,
Right?
yes, just find us. We're honest and
We're
maybe
honest.
not hottest. It's
Also,
fine.
this is probably why so many kids see things they're not supposed to when honest autocorrects to hottest.
Right. That's fucked up.
Right.
Yeah.
So go to YouTube, type in Honest Women Podcast, make sure it stays there. And what do we want them to do? Do that thing you do.
Oh my gosh. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I can't.
Yes, I love it. I love it. It's my favorite thing. And one of my friends actually said it to me the other day. Like and subscribe.
I can't
Like and
even deal
subscribe.
with myself right now.
Oh my God, I love it.
Also, if you don't usually go to YouTube for podcasts, just make sure that you follow us wherever you actually are. So if you listen in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or some other podcast app, just follow us there so that you don't miss us. Because I don't want you to go to YouTube, find us, the hottest, honest women, and then subscribe over there because you love us and maybe even leave us a comment because you want us to feel good about ourselves, which would be really nice.
I love
But
it.
then not get us because you're not over
Yes.
there. So just wherever you are.
Wherever you are, like, subscribe, follow, all of the things.
Comment,
so you can hear
review,
us.
send us to people. Do all
Yeah,
the things. You
do
can do
all
all
the
the things.
And they're in our show notes as well. So if you fast forward through the introduction and you don't hear this, but now you're listening a few minutes in, go to our page and we have in our show notes all of the places that you can find us. They are there for you. Notes already done, ladies and gentlemen. So my husband and I took a short kind of trip with the kids, not too far, for a long weekend, little getaway, which gave me the opportunity. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Listen to podcasts. I listen to podcasts.
Oh, look at you.
Are you so proud of me?
This is actually a secret. I don't think everybody understands why this is a big deal.
I know.
Go ahead.
Jessica doesn't really listen to podcasts.
Jessica doesn't really listen to podcasts. You listen to ours though, right?
I listen to ours.
It's good.
I listen to ours all the time. It's the only one I listen to. I know. I'm getting better at it. Okay.
Good for
I
you.
mean, it's adding it into my daily routine here. So I was on some really beautiful walks that I took advantage of listening to some podcasts. And I started listening to an episode with the Gottmans, which we will talk a little bit about who the heck they are for those who do not know them. But I have to be honest, I'm listening to them speak about some things that I know about. And my thought to myself was, crap. Oh my God, I'm not doing any of this in my own marriage.
Oh, yeah. That
Yeah.
happens sometimes.
Because one of the biggest misperceptions about therapists is that one, we have our shit together, right? And two, that all the things that we have studied, we read about, we learn, we just automatically implement into our own lives. And therefore, it's great, wonderful, and we're
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, uh, I mean, we'll get into this more soon, but I think that the notion that just learning something or learning it once will allow you to do it and do it perfectly when you're activated and in relationship and whatever. No, that's false. That's real false.
Right? It is
Mhm.
completely false.
Mhm.
So, do you want to tell them who Julie and John Gottman,
I
who they
I
are?
do. So, Julie and John Gottman are some of the premier researchers in couples relationships. And what they really got started in was doing research and being able to predict which couples would get divorced based on got down to like a really small amount of interaction. It was like 6 minutes or something like that. That in their relationship lab, that the Gottmans, their researchers could watch a couple for like just this little bit of time and then say with like pretty high accuracy who is going to get divorced. And so because of this, they've become some of the leading voices in marriage, therapy, in relationships, in everything. They're everywhere. And yeah, I have thoughts about that. I
I know
have
you do. I
mhm.
know you have some thoughts of that. Let me ask you a quick question.
Mhm.
Would you step into, I believe they call it their love lab with your husband?
Fuck no.
Thank you. Thank God you said that because
No.
I was thinking the same thing. Nope, don't want to know.
No.
I'm good.
No. Yeah, we're good. Thanks,
We're
Gottmans.
challenging that, Gottmans. We're not
Right.
going in your lab. We don't want to know. It's like if somebody can
No.
predict the future, I don't want to know.
Right. Right. They're
Tell
like,
me how
"You're
I can
will
fix
you
shit now.
right, will you die a horrible death?" No, thanks.
I
Don't need
don't
to
need
know.
to know
Don't
that.
need to know. Well, especially because, and this is my issue, that then the Gottmans used that information on which marriages would fall apart to kind of reverse engineer the kind of behaviors that you would need to have for your relationship to succeed. But I think that they offer a really simple solutions.
Right.
So
And what we know and why we kind of started this podcast too is it's not simple,
no.
but it's talking about topics that are much more complex than we give credit to.
Mm-hmm.
But to be fair, there are little things we can do on a day to day basis to help our marriages.
So true. Yeah, I think for a long time, I rejected practical advice because I was like, that is not how people work, right? Don't tell me to make a love map with my partner because that's just not what plays out in our day to day. That is true. However, understanding why, complicated things happen and negative things happen, that needs to be there, but then also you have to do the things. You have to do the
Right.
things, like the simple things, the nice things. You have to do the things. And in some ways we can let ourselves off the hook a little bit. Like, oh, I understand the deep reasons why we get stuck in this cycle without then being like, and I have to stop being such an asshole.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and to be clear, like if you go back to I think it was actually called 10 Tips to Fix Your Marriage. I
Yeah.
mean, it was kind of like one of those. We talk about little things that you actually can do today with the
Mhm.
caveat, though, that it's not going to fix the foundation of your marriage, but they're
Mhm.
little things you can incorporate today.
Yep.
This episode is similar to that. It's a concept that can help in your day to day marriage, but it's not going
Mhm.
to fix a broken foundation.
Right. Right. You
So,
need both.
exactly. So, Julie and John Gottman have coined what we now call bids for connection.
Mhm.
Now, I'm really happy, Andrea, that you talked about those practical advice
Mhm.
because this is why when I went and was listening to this episode, bids for connection is very much practical. I'm choking on my words here. Bids for connection are very much practical little behavioral things that I heard at one time that I poo pooed all over,
Mhm.
right? Hence why I'm listening to it and then saying, crap, I should be doing some of these things today.
Yeah.
So, what is a bid for connection? And according to the Gottmans, it's any attempt from one partner to another for
Mhm.
attention, affirmation, affection, or any positive connection.
Mhm.
And according to them, they show up in very simple ways a lot of the time, like a
Mhm.
little smile, a little wink, or they can also show up in just more complex ways like, hey, can you help me out over here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, said it in a nice way, right?
Correct. That's a
Mm-hmm.
very important one. So they might take on the form of an expression, a question, or even a physical outreach.
Mm-hmm.
They can be funny. They can be serious. They
Mm-hmm.
can even be sexual in nature.
Heyo.
Hey, yo, what? That will be a future one. Now, in general, women tend to make more bids than men.
Yes. Because
Okay,
these are
so
just
give
like
me
comments, right? This is just relational things. This is just the patter of the day. That's as
correct.
I look at this list, that's what I see.
So give me
Things
a couple of
like,
them. Give me a
so,
couple examples.
okay, this is a dumb one, but it's sometimes sending or sharing a funny little video, an Instagram reel, a meme. You send that over to your partner and then you ask something like, did you see that dog video? And yes, unfortunately, this is a big part of how we connect with one another.
I'm so happy you brought this up because she doesn't know this, folks, but this was the exact reason that I said to myself, crap, 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 crap. Literally, she doesn't know this.
I did not know that.
I know. I was thinking about all of the times my husband has sent me a silly little video
Mm-hmm.
or been like, sitting next to me or or come into the, other room and said, oh my God, you have to see this. It's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
And I reject it like bad.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like from a how dare you think that I would want to see that stupid video.
Oh, I love the videos.
Oh,
I love
gosh. But I'm like, this is what actually got me to wanting to do this episode is
Yeah.
my own thoughts about how much I have rejected my husband's bids for connection.
Yeah, 100%. I think when, he says like, hey, can we sit down and talk about the calendar? Or what do you think about this thing that's happening in my
Wait, your
work?
husband asked to look in the calendar?
Only at the, like, when things are really disastrous.
I was
I
like,
can also
"Oh."
ask that, right? So when I say,
True.
hey, can we talk about the schedule for this weekend? That's a bid for connection. And it would not be received as such at all. Similarly, me saying something like, I'm so wiped out today. It's a bid for connection.
Yes, it is.
And it is not well received in my world.
No, it is not. So there are 3 ways, according to the Gottmans, that you can respond to a bid.
Mhm.
Number 1 would be turning towards, so you
Mhm.
acknowledge it, right? I look at the video and I say, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Thank you for sharing it, right? I turn towards. Second one is turning away. So I ignore it.
Yeah.
Or I just miss it. I don't know, like in your example, that was a bid.
Right.
Or 3, we turn against, which is rejecting the bid in argumentative or a belligerent way.
Yeah.
Stop interrupting me. I'm trying to read here.
Yeah, outright. Aggressive, direct.
Yes.
So I think that if I'm being self-reflective, 9 times out of 10, I don't know I'm making a bid. I wouldn't describe it that way. And I miss every bid that my spouse makes. And it's not just our spouses, it's our kids too, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I just think about what it's like for me when I, toss over a little question, like this is a great example. This morning, we're in the kitchen. My husband's clearly sort of working on something, but I walk in and I'm like, oh, yeah, I heard about this thing on a podcast. Or, gosh, I was worried about something with one of our kids. I'm really worried about this thing that's happening. He's doing something else, but I'm trying to connect with him, right? And that moment where, like, if he puts down what he's doing and he turns and he looks at me, it is like amazing. But most of the time, you're just like kind of continue what you're doing. And we were in the reverse, like 3 minutes later. I was sitting there typing, preparing for this episode, and he's like chit-chatting with me, right? And I'm like, how can I ignore this more obviously, right? I'm like, it's just like the
Yeah, you're
not
in
interested
it. You're
in
in the
stopping what
zone.
I'm doing.
Yes.
Right. And I just think about, for me, that's the most destructive. Not only is it the most common, because an aggressive, outright rejection, like I'm doing something right now, I can be like, you're a dick, right? Or he can be like, God, what's wrong with her? But if you continuously ignore me or just like, it starts to make you feel like you don't even exist.
Yes. Yes. Okay, hold that. I just took a
Mhm.
note and like banged my water bottle when I did that. But I took
Sorry.
a quick note because I want to come back to that because it's so
Mhm.
important,
Mhm.
right? So let me geek out for just a hot minute with a little bit of the research from the Gottman.
Okay.
So as part of their research, the Gottmans conducted a study with newlyweds and then they followed up with them 6 years later.
Mhm.
Many of those couples 6 years later were still together and many of them divorced.
Mhm.
The couples that stayed married were better at one thing, and that
Mm.
was turning towards one another.
Mhm.
And at that 6-year follow-up, couples that stayed married turned towards each other 86% of the time.
Mhm.
Couples that divorced averaged only 33% of the time.
Oof.
Right? Right? I know. This is
I'm
why
not
I'm not getting
stepping
in their
into your
love
lab,
lab.
Gottman. No,
Hell
we're
no.
not going to your lab.
Hell no, not
Uh,
doing it.
Also, don't you think it would be so different if we were in the lab and my husband was like, da da da? I'd be like, oh, what? But
I
if
almost
I'm doing something at home, which honestly, I think this is part of the problem, is that I've been doing something since the minute that we had children. There's just like no margin left. I'm always
Yeah.
doing something. He's always doing something. And there's just that sense that we're both making bids, but we're
And
also
they go
both missing them
past
so often.
so often. And I
Mhm.
think what you're speaking to is how indirect they can
Mhm.
be. Hence why when I first listened to this concept of bids, I very much rejected it years and
Mhm.
years and years ago. It was just like whatever. Now as a 41-year-old, I embraced it so much more because I now looked at some of the silly things that my husband
Mhm.
will do as a bid for connection.
Mhm.
I have to own it. I was not seeing that
Mm-mm.
as his way of trying to connect with me. And
Yeah.
then feeling actually pretty bad because I will say, not only did I turn away, I probably did it from a place of like criticism.
Mhm.
I got to own my part here.
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about seasons of marriage
Mm.
because that is what I think happens is that bids for connection in early marriage are much different than later when you
Yeah,
become parents.
absolutely. I
So, how do you see these bids show up in your office or in your personal life based on where you're at in this season of your marriage?
Well, if I just reflect on, this season, no, I'm going to go back. When we were dating and first married, the whole damn thing is a bid for connection. And every single thing that they do and every single thing that you do, you're like, there's there's space for it. There's desire for it. There's like connectivity for it, there's like excitement around it. Every single damn thing that one of you does, it's like you're very focused on it. You give a lot of positive connection and you're noticing at a high level how someone responds. And to be fair, if someone wasn't responsive to your bids for connection or they didn't offer a lot of them, you probably wouldn't get together, right? Like
For
you'd go on a
sure.
couple dates and be like, "Burr." So I think most of us who end up married had a season where we were really into each other,
Oh,
making
yeah.
a lot of bids for connection and a lot of positive bids, a lot of vulnerable ones, right?
Oh, absolutely. There was less time invested in it. It was
Mhm.
less risky at that point, meaning there
Mhm.
probably wasn't a long history of feeling rejected,
Yeah.
right? And so each time we leaned in, we probably were more apt to get the response we needed, hence why we
Right.
ended up getting married in the first place.
Right. And I think that it was also more risky, especially at the beginning of the
Ooh,
relationship.
okay.
Like, when everything that you do is so loaded and you're like, how are they going to respond? Right. That's that early stage of, woo woo when you start being with someone. And so I just think it's heightened. Like there's more awareness around it. It's like everything's mindful and amplified when you're in this early stage together. Don't you
Yeah,
think?
you're trying to, well, I mean, you're right. You're trying to like put your best foot forward, though,
Hmm.
too. You don't want to be rejected. So essentially, there's less rejection between the two,
Yeah.
but there's more emphasis on not wanting to be
Yes.
rejected is kind of
Yeah.
what I think you're speaking to.
And back in the day when we were dating, we didn't have so many distractions. So
Right.
when I was with my partner, when I was with my soon-to-be husband, we were together to have fun together, right?
Yes.
So that time was really set aside, set apart. It was just a lot easier.
Well, and here's then when we fast forward a little bit to kids coming to the mix, right? And I was thinking about this a lot is the bids change sometimes. I think, let me know what you think, that oftentimes the bids from women can change a little bit more than maybe the bids from men.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Okay. Meaning, like my husband sharing a silly little video is something he would have done 20 years ago. Well, we haven't been together that long. So not 20 years ago, but like 16, right?
Yeah.
But that has not changed how he tries to, like get that attention from me. He has a wonderful sense of humor that when we're traveling, just me and him, I remember how much I love. However, when we're in the midst of everything in our house, it drives me bonkers. But what I've noticed since listening to this podcast is a lot of his bids are the same as they've always been. But I respond to him a lot different. And now as a mom, my bids are a lot less, I don't know, sexy
Yeah.
or cute
Right.
or attractive.
Nice.
And they're, nice.
They're not
They're
nice.
much more like logistic,
Yeah.
help me out here. And I can see, I would love to, like the 6-year mark, I would love to know how many of those couples had kids that got divorced.
Yeah.
And how many of those couples who stayed together did or did not have kids. I want to know that variable.
Yeah.
Because I think as a woman myself and inside my office with couples that I see who have, younger kids, I see this confusion a lot with like husbands saying, but you used to love that about me, or you used to love that I did that. And then the wife being like, well, that was 10 years ago. Like, grow
Right.
up. This is stupid. Right.
Yeah. I also think that I just feel like this touches on resentment. It touches on the mental load. It touches on the imbalance in the workload and families where there's children, especially. And I think that if men don't evolve a little bit in their bids, it's missed.
Yeah.
And I think that if they don't see their wife trying to coordinate, right? Or even trying to share a difficult load as a bid, then all of the wife's moves towards their husband in a logistical way gets lost as if it's just logistics. And this list makes me think it's not just logistics. Saying, hey, can we talk about the calendar for the weekend? That's a bid. And if I don't get credit for that bid when I'm running a million miles an hour, if that's not seen as partnering, or if I say, God, I'm so exhausted and I'm criticized for that, or, my husband rolls his eyes or is like, well, when aren't you? I'm not saying that he's done that, but plenty of husbands
mine
do,
has.
right?
Mine has. I have too.
Right. We all have. But it's when we don't count these things as attempts to connect and we say, oh, it's just logistics. Well, it's not just logistics. We have to work that shit out, right?
Yeah.
And we have to be able to coordinate better so that we can function. And if we function better, guess what? There's more room for positivity and gentleness and fun and levity and, but all the bids count.
Yes.
We don't get credit for that.
Count. And because they're not as direct, right? Can we look at the calendar? Can we go over the calendar together? That is not direct. That is not, hey, I really want us to be on the same page this week. Can we go over the calendar? Right. So when that's not there, it's easier to miss if we don't know what the other person is wanting.
Right.
And in the podcast I was listening to, actually, it was Brene Brown. And she gave a beautiful example that I related to so much. And she said, how many times she's missed her own husband's
Mhm.
bids for connection because of, and this going back to kind of when you were talking about, your husband reaching out and being in the kitchen or being in the middle of something.
Mhm.
It's exactly her example. She said what she has noticed is how important the story she tells herself is.
Mhm.
So she gave the example of working, right? She's doing her work and she's like in it,
Mhm.
in that zone. And her husband comes in and says, like, hey, take a look at this.
Mhm.
And she would do what I would probably do is be kind of critical, snap at him,
Mhm.
like, I'm in the middle of something,
Yeah.
right? And go back to it. And she said what she noticed is the story she was telling herself is he does not respect my work.
Mm.
I am trying to work. He comes in and wants to distract me. He has no respect for what I do.
Right.
And it was
Right.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
mind blowing because it spoke to how important not only the miss is, right? Like
Right.
turning against, but the story we then attach to it.
Yes, and in emotionally focused therapy for couples, we would mention that that is part of the perception or the
Yep.
attribution, right? It's the meaning that we make. So, again, I think part of the problem and why the idea of bids is both brilliant and just insufficient is that most couples, by the time you're in the trenches, right? Like you've been married for a while, you have kids, you're in a cycle of disconnection. And something as simple as, from a pursuing partner to a withdrawing partner, or often from a woman to a man, something as simple as, I really want us to be on the same page about this weekend. Can we talk about the schedule? Is interpreted as, what? You don't think that I know what's going on? Oh, you want to tell me what to do? Oh, like you just want to own all that, right?
Yes.
Negative, negative. And so a lot of times, a woman's making bids to try to coordinate, and a man is perceiving that as, she doesn't think I'm good enough. He's taking it
Yes.
as a slight. And that causes problems. And then he's not very nice and doesn't make enough bids to start with, or he comes in with a stupid squirrel video and you're like, dude, you are
I don't
not
want to
nice to
see
me, right?
that.
It's just the cycle that grabs on the stories that we tell, the additional meaning that's assigned, or the lack of repair that we make.
Which
That
is a big part of it,
Right. And if you
right?
haven't listened to our episode on repair, on apologizing well, go back and listen to that. It's on YouTube.
Yes, it is. It's
Mhm.
on YouTube. And that's why Andrea and I ended up becoming trained in emotionally focused couples therapy,
Mhm.
right? We believe very much it was getting down to like the nitty gritty, like getting down to the raw stuff in order to change
Mhm.
the foundation versus implementing these behavioral things.
Mhm.
However, I will say that these little things, like noticing my own husband's attempts to connect with me,
Mhm.
I have become more aware of those, and turning towards him has
Mhm.
significantly helped. I will say
100%.
that, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But again, it's
Yeah.
the expectation that we attach to it. If
Right.
you are in a really bad cycle, a cycle is kind of what we refer to in emotionally focused therapy lingo.
Mhm.
If it's just a state of distress, no, like bids of connection and turning towards and that is not going to fix it.
Right.
Again, this is something small though that you can do. And I'm telling you, I've had a lot
Mhm.
of people, and we've had a lot of people write in, and I've had people tell me that looking at their partner, noticing them when
Yeah.
they walk into the room, which we talked about in our episode, our tips that we don't
Mhm.
do, but we did, episode significantly changed the temperature in the room.
It absolutely does. And that is one of those things. Like, none of these tips or tricks will fix a foundational problem.
No,
However, you still have to do these things, right? Because it changes the environment. I just think that we want to acknowledge that these things become hard to implement. Like, this isn't a simple solution. Turning towards your
no,
partner isn't simple when you have a lot of criticism or a lot of blame or a lot of withdrawing and disconnection. It's like you both still have to do it, but you're climbing up a mountain that's icy in your flip-flops and you're like, why isn't this solving everything? Well, because you've got an environment, you've got a cycle, you've got so much weight on everything that you do that's making this feel less effective. And you still have to do it. You still have to try.
Yes.
Mhm.
So here's one thing I want to talk about as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up today's
Mhm.
episode is how can we, me and you, so we're not necessarily telling our listeners, but we kind of indirectly are, but we're talking about how can we take this information today and implement it in
Yeah.
our own marriages?
Okay. Again, practical, simple, but this actually just came up this week. I was sitting on the couch working, and this is a big problem because I do a lot of after school childcare when my work is not done, right? So I'm in the midst of everybody and I'm sitting there and I was just in the middle of something and my son actually, so not my husband, but my son comes up and he always starts something like right in the middle. He'll say, I just don't know about this thing with my friends, you know?
Gosh.
And I, if not for thinking this through, if not for understanding that as a bid for connection, I would have been like, okay, buddy, like, and just kept typing. And what I did was I literally shut my computer. I was
Look at
like,
you.
I was so proud of myself. I was like, he's trying to connect with you. I mean, what a gift from my 13-year-old son.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
I need to see that as gold. And so I think the thing that we can do first is attempt to recognize these. I noticed this with my husband. He texted me the other day. I had texted him to ask him if he had cut me strawberries, and he texted me back that the kids ate all the strawberries and he had tried. And then later that day, he texted me, how's your day been outside of the strawberry situation? He's almost always the one who texts to ask. I mean, our job doesn't really give us enough flexibility in the day, but he texts to see how I'm going, and I saw it as a bid. And so I want to recognize these bids. I want to give them the credit and the weight that they are due. And then when they come in, like, stop what I'm doing and literally turn towards them. And if there's tech involved, close the computer,
Yes.
put down the phone. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I love that. And here's what I have started doing is I have started paying a lot of attention to the story I tell myself and really looking at, is that accurate?
Right.
Is that true? So I love to play fact or fiction with myself. Is this factual information or am I creating a really not great story in my head? A lot of times it's a not great story in my head that blocks my ability to turn towards in that sense. I also will say that I've learned to be a little bit more direct, right? Like me saying, can we go through the calendar? I know how it's heard now, right? In this stage of my marriage, I know where it's heard versus I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I want you to feel in the loop.
Yeah.
About it. Oh, that makes sense. It's the response is different
Totally.
when I'm more direct.
And I think making little bids that are nonverbal that just change the environment. We talked in our tips about marriage about like non-sexual touching, like just more affection. So adding some of that into the day. If every time I walk past my husband, I look at him, or if I touch him as if we walk past each other, then when I say, can we talk about the calendar? I want to be on the same page as you. He believes it. Versus if I just have my eyes down, we don't touch each other at all. There's no affection in our day to day. Then it's like, oh, good. Sounds like fun,
This isn't good. This isn't great. So here's what I'm going to do. One, go to our show notes. We're working on those. We'd love feedback, but I'm going to put a couple questions that are in there that are Gottman questions. They're not mine, from their inventory. That might be a good prompt for you, the listener, to kind of do some inventory on yourself. A couple examples of them are, what do I know about how I make bids? Or what is my impulse? What is that story I tell myself that makes me turn away? Okay, so I would love for you guys to go there and check that out, because Andrea and I firmly believe that these conversations are best and more beneficial when there aren't just content to consume, but we want them to be a jumping off point for more honesty in your own life, because honest reflection and conversation is the first step to real connection with yourself and with others. Should I just leave it there?
Maybe.
I mean, we're at 35 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on, let me stop it.